Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of Destination India Conversations. Our subject today is travel and tourism. In the larger context, what is happening to this industry? A lot of data is coming forward in last couple of weeks. For instance, one MNC report on India is showing India is already the sixth largest travel and tourism economy in the world, likely to become the fourth largest travel and tourism economy in some 10 years from hence. Largest, fourth largest from sixth largest. The impression obviously here is talking about the travel and tourism economy as a whole, where we talk about aviation, we talk about railways, we talk about transport as a whole, we talk about hospitality across the board, we talk about experiential, we talk about five-star, so every element of it is covered. In that scenario, we also gathered, and I have some very interesting statistics which I shared with you this morning. There's a nifty India Tourism Index, which has been floated there. And it's very interesting to see in the last 1 year ROIs from some of the majors that we see. East India Hotels, 113% in the last 1 year. You see IHCL is 66.3%.
You're talking of growth.
No, this is investor return.
1 year return.
Okay,
Investor
return. Okay.
Indigo, last 1 year return, 75.4%. GMR, 133%. Company like Jubilant, which you can say is part of the travel and tourism segment as a whole, 12%. Now, that's the kind of mind-boggling growth that you're seeing in the travel and tourism component. In this scenario, confining ourselves to the overall travel and tourism picture, can I start with you, Rohit? Rohit is Managing Director of Creative Travels, specialized inbound agency, also doing inbound.
Outbound.
Largest or leading, shall I say, Indian-owned tour operating company. And he's the second generation in the company. And Rohit, just share with us as a tour operator, what is your sense of the industry growth at the moment?
So these figures are not representative or reflective of the actual scenario on the ground. These are investor returns rather than growth across. Now, a lot of the hotel companies have grown, a factor of them growing properties, footprint on the ground, etc. That's natural progression for them, a lot of them. We will need to break this down because tourism today is not just inbound, it's outbound, it's domestic, and within domestic there are again subcategorizations, i.e. religious and VFR, etc., etc. One of the biggest misleading numbers that is thrown around always in our country is the foreign tourist arrivals. Unfortunately, we are all fed this data that captures arrivals and not tourists. So anyone who comes into the country, whether it's for business, whether Mr. Patel with an OCI is coming to visit his sick grandmother, whether somebody is coming to come just for 2 days to Bombay for a business trip, according to them, that is all tourism. Now, they're not wrong because the official categorization of a tourist is 24 hours in another city, etc., etc.
And spending in foreign exchange.
And yeah, well, spending in not in your own country or city of origin, that's a tourist. Now, they're not wrong, but if a tourism ministry were to do a deep dive, this is not tourism. Also, most of the foreign tourist arrivals happen from neighboring countries who come for a different reason completely. So, domestic tourism has definitely grown. I think COVID has taught everybody that taking quick, shorter trips is a great thing to do. There's been a lifestyle shift for many Indians, which is great. And
What is driving this momentum for domestic? It's unheard of actually.
Now, I wanted to ask one more
Both in
question.
numbers and, as well as in.
But you know, I think
Value.
it's a shift in mindset. Number one. Number two, ease of getting around
No, and the money you have to spend.
and disposable income.
Yeah.
You know, people are now we're moving away from a saving economy. You know, people used to save up and never spend. Now we're moving to a spending economy, which is great.
And the
from all
husband and
parameters.
wife are both earning. I
Both
wanted
earning.
to ask you, since you are good on figures, what about inbound and outbound?
No,
Do you have the
we're not talking-
percentages?
Just give me
Okay.
You give me the overall travel and tourism picture as you see it. You have 18 properties,
Yes.
heritage properties.
Yeah. We only do, Neemrana only does heritage, yeah. So
So
the market is
what
booming.
is your sense of it in your segment?
I think that we've not had any, drop. So because the product is unique, and I can say this for all the heritage hotel owners because I'm in their executive committee and we meet. So the thing is that it's very often the first choice of inbound tourists because they don't
No,
want
but
to come.
overall, your industry
Is doing very well.
is doing very well. Have you seen such days before?
Well, it's
This
a
kind of
it's
occupancy,
a
this kind of
progression.
average rate.
But the Indians are traveling a lot. So what has happened is that it's not just the foreigner we're depending upon. When Neemrana opened, we had 60% foreigners and 40% Indians. The Neemrana Fort Palace. But that was a very different thing. There was not so many products like that. Was
And
unique.
today, what is the kind of scenario?
Today, I think it's become like 90%, 80-90% Indians. Also
there you
because
go.
of COVID.
There you go.
And at that figure, what is the return that you are getting from the Indian traveler as
The same.
opposed to what you are getting from the foreign traveler?
The same. Our rates are not different for them.
No,
Yeah.
in terms of, it's a common rate.
We have
But
the
is the
same rate.
Indian spending more? Like he's ordering more wine and whiskey and ordering more things?
I think the Indian is not poor anymore, and when they look at a menu, very often the reaction is, do you have something like more expensive than that? They don't, even for rooms.
Willing to
So
explore more.
yeah, there's not only
Like-
the.
No, taste have changed.
Sarabjit, would you, Sarabjit, Managing Director of Karachi, KTC, India, India's largest or
One of the largest.
among the largest transport fleets in the country. Again, you've been around for 50 years, 60
Plus.
years, 50 years plus. And today, you have also seen that diversification in business, which Rohit was talking about, in terms of just not so many subsets available in the travel and tourism segment. So, how do you see as a transporter or even as an inbound? You're also an inbound. So, where do you see the trend moving forward?
Personally, if I talk about our own company, inbound after COVID, it has not picked up properly. We are going to do around 80% of the business this year.
That is at KTC.
I'm talking about inbound.
ATC inbound.
KTC. But the transport segment, we have seen, because earlier we were hooked up with the tourism in transportation.
When you say tourism, you mean inbound leisure.
And leisure and all foreigners coming into India. Now we have opened up to others also. In the last 5 years, we have actually seen 4 or 5 times growth in our transport business. So, when we were talking about inbound scenario today, if foreigners are not coming in, there are reasons to it that we can, I think the government is looking at, but serious business is yet to pick up.
Kapil, as head of CAPA India, India's only or largest specialized exclusive aviation consulting company with tentacles in how many countries?
About 6 countries, yes. 6 countries.
6 countries.
Direct and indirect.
And you're Australia based.
As Australia based, yes.
And you've been doing extensive research in aviation matters for
Correct.
airlines, for airports.
Yes.
You were behind the feasibility study, etc., for the Aerocity and the GMR at Goa, amongst others. You're also advising, consulting neighboring countries.
Yes, we are advising them. Yes.
So you are also witnessing this huge infrastructure growth in terms of airports, in terms of induction of aircrafts, unheard of again. What is your sense? Where is this impetus coming from? What is happening?
I think if you look at the last 20 years, we had a very unstable airline system, and some of the challenges the ecosystem felt, which I would say, at least including the domestic, was that the airline system was unstable because it's a very tough business to operate in. Most of the time, the cost of your input costs are not compensated by your fare inputs. Most of the airlines are undercapitalized. So if you look at the last 20 years, which is with the second phase of deregulation, we've lost about $18 billion of losses of the industry. 3 big players exited.
This is amongst airlines only,
Only
or
airlines,
airlines and airports?
only airlines. Airports don't lose much money. So you have 3 major exits. You had first Kingfisher, which closed when it had 89 planes. Jet closed when it had 110 or plus. Go had about 55. So there are these major exits, and most of the airline industry has been unstable. Now, once Tata's took over Air India, that was the beginning of what I call a critical inflection point. That 4 airlines got together. But more important than 4 airlines getting together was a major Indian corporate with the willingness to put in the capital that is required, patient capital, wait in a manner so that it can emerge as a world-class airline. That to me was an inflection point. That was Jan 22. In the last 2 years, I think that inflection point has turned right, and right is that we are heading for an irreversible stability in the airline system in India.
Is this growth sustainable, which you see?
I think we are going to see an exceptional growth, in which, as Rohit and all of us must take note of. In the last 90 years since aviation was commercialized in India, it took us 90 years to be about 700 plus planes. 90 years. In the next 5 to 7 years, we will add 700 planes. So we're going to double the industry. What took us 90 years to double, we'll do in 5, 7 years. My view is that another 5 years from 2030, we'll double up again, closer to double up. So in the next 10 years, you're going to see 700 planes moving to about 1,800 to 2,000.
So we'll be second only to
So
America.
every 5 years, 5 to 7 years, you could double.
Tell me,
And just wanted to add, the reason why this growth has strong fundamentals is that if you look at the principal air carrier Indigo, which has had an exceptional run, is right now having a cash of 4 billion. Having seen the industry very closely, I could never ever imagine that an airline would be a $20 billion airline, would record a 1 billion profit, has $4 billion of cash, and by the end of this fiscal, which is FY25, my view is that there will be about $6 billion, closer to $6 billion of cash. So they have the product, they have the brand, they have about 1,100 aircraft, including the wide body options and now ATRs. I think they are one of the strong pillars.
What is causing this growth? I mean,
Growth is...
Where's the traffic coming from?
No, there is the under-penetration in India, even in domestic. You have 153 million people. The number of people who actually fly are not more than 20%. So the number of travelers, unique travelers I would call it, there are people who fly every week or twice a week. So if you take that, I think we have the under-penetration is massive, and that is defined by when you have a Bareilly-Bombay flight, Mr. Berry. And it's very important to know that when you have a Bareilly-Bombay flight and you look at the data as who's traveling, there's no data available, and the airlines do 90% load factor, 95% load factor. Look at Istanbul, India, which is on the international side. When Indigo started, 90%, 95%. They don't have seats on their wide body. We are the most under-penetrated market. And I think with the stable airline system, which has stability primarily from the perspective of balance sheet and the ability to fund, and a long-term
Then
view, I think
should we be having any concern about the overall ecosystem and the infrastructure that we will need to cater to all these growing aircrafts? And
I think if you are doubling up the industry, the physical infrastructure is very critical. Luckily, for the next 5-7 years, I think our airport infrastructure at metros and to some extent non-metros is ahead of demand. We'll have a new airport in Navi Mumbai, a new airport in Noida,
Jay,
Delhi airport is
What
going to
about the supporting system like the
challenge.
ATC?
The challenge is that. Challenge is the institutional infrastructure. When you're doubling the industry, at the same time when you're transforming the industry with such a growth, you're having a digital disruption. The third part is you're having an environmental ESG disruption. These three things happening simultaneously. You have a once in a generation growth over 10 years. You have a digital disruption of an order that we haven't seen. You will see an ESG disruption. So the skill sets that you require to manage
Right.
this growth, I don't think are there. I don't think are there. If you look at the institutional infrastructure, whether it's policy, regulation, skills, the physical regime, it isn't there at all. We don't have that institutional infrastructure.
So
And,
I'm sure
and I
that
would say
the-
shortage of skills.
I'm sure the powers and the planners that we are also aware of the fact that we have to double up our efforts in some of these
No,
directions.
to be frank with you, I think we should have started 2 years back to plan for what's going to happen over the next 5-7 years. The speed of change, everybody's aware that we're getting these planes.
What about
but
these newer airports that are, like you said, Bareilly? One had not thought of Bareilly on the map of India.
You'll see
So
so many
how
of
many
these.
more cities do you see, say, in another 2 years from now?
20 to 30 more new points will be introduced. Indigo is 40% monopoly routes they'll maintain. They'll try to find new city pairs. You are going to see a lot of flights from Andhra now. You're going to see a lot of flights from southern is part of India is well captured, but still Andhra is underpenetrated. Uttar Pradesh is underpenetrated. So you can see a lot of infrastructure is being built. So my view about that is that when you're doubling every 5-7 years, you have to relook and to step back and say, do we have the institutional infrastructure? Do we have that competence in that institutional infrastructure? How do we get these people? We need 10,000 pilots every 5 years. We need 30,000 technicians over 10 years. So where are we going to get them from?
So this
That's
is
the
a
challenge.
growth area for the Indian economy.
I would think it will be what telecom was in the 90s. I genuinely
Yeah.
believe that it's going to be the greatest thing that will happen to Indian economy.
You're saying
But,
it's going to be the greatest thing that's happened to the
Absolutely, but it needs to be managed and perhaps understood as well.
And to come back to what Rohit said, you may have heard that bit at that time, that the segmentation of travel and tourism, which is going into various categories of travelers, so to say, you see that being evenly distributed somewhere, or
So-
is it just in lieu of going on a railway ticket or a road ticket, it's pure air transport?
No, so the percentage of post-COVID when people started traveling to Indian cities, I mean, they have really rediscovered the domestic market because they had no options. They experienced perhaps had a similar experience to what they had overseas. Obviously, the pricing was similar in many cases. You still buy a ticket for 20,000 or have a hotel for 30,000-40,000 rupees room. So I think the mindset, as he said, was correct, and the experiences were good.
Aman, do you want to add something more to the larger travel and tourism picture before we move to the second segment?
No, so since I am
You see more heritage properties coming up?
absolutely, because the minute you start landing in other places in Uttar Pradesh, just now the government had put lots of things to tender and we bid for them, and by the time we're ready in 2 years, there will be an airport in Jhansi, there will be, there's plans for many things.
There will
So
be about 200 airports in the next 5
What
years.
about Rajasthan? Is Rajasthan also witnessing more airports?
that you would know
All
by
over.
better. Yeah, so
All over. There are about 200
Like
airports.
Kota and so on?
I don't have the specific numbers right now, but I think we're going to have 200 new airports over 10 years.
That's what the figure is.
200 new airports, yes.
So
which
you want to add
new
something more?
Two
Just
new
to
and
overall
refurb,
travel
right?
and-
new would mean the
Enlarged.
ones that are currently not in use. You will have that,
Yeah, of course.
and there'll be new as well. Yes,
but Kota has an airport.
yes there.
Rohit, anything more on the larger travel and tourism picture?
I wanted to add, and to what I was saying earlier and to what Kapil just said, there is also movement at the lowest end of the market, which is the mass of India, i.e. companies like Flixbus, which are European bus companies, intercity bus
Yes,
companies
yes, yes.
entering the market. I read about that only very recently, which is I think it's a great sign. because you need these now we're going to have, and it takes time, but we're going to have these great highways connecting cities. But there is no transport available to people. You know, getting people from point A to point B in these buses in a safe and comfortable manner will be a great boost to tourism, because see, the critical mass is always going to be at the lowest end of the market in India.
I'm
the
not very
luggage-
sure. I'm not sure about
No,
that.
because that's
but
where the numbers are.
I'll tell you that
Very from a number point
we
of
are
view.
underestimating the addressable market.
The what?
Addressable market with about $20,000 plus.
No, but that's not the critical mass.
It's about,
You know-
if you look at the number of trips that they can do, domestic and international, it's going to be 3-4x of what's our current international and domestic market. So the lower end of the pyramid, you need to define those are not the guys who are traveling. The 50 million who have an addressable income of about 20,000 to a middle income or a high income European country, we are that market.
Yeah.
If we're looking at that market, 50 million, and it's about, you can have 3 to 4 times of your outbound.
I'm only referring to numbers of people.
generally
only.
saying.
But I want to ask you a question, Kapil.
No, but before you say, I wanted to add this thing to you. You talked about inbound, and we do a lot on the inbound. Maybe
No,
it's not.
we'll come to inbound
Okay.
in the sense.
But I want to ask you a question, and this is an argument I have with a lot of people about airfares in India. Now, do you think airfares in India are high or not high?
I don't think they're high.
They're not high, right?
We are used to paying very low fares, and
Variable airfares now all over, right?
No, I mean you pay. I think for a similar distance in India, you pay far less than you would for a domestic flight in Europe or the US.
yes, of course,
Yes,
they're
that's
more
what it is,
expensive.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
The
A lot of people
problem was-
seem to think that airfares in India are very high.
Can I conclude with your?
I wanted to say.
Yes, please.
I wanted to say, you were talking about heritage tourism. What's happening is, of course, that has been the allure of India, because, we've got 5,000 years and, we are 2,500 years ahead in architecture from Europe. So the West used to come. But what has happened with the new generation in India is, with their education, their mindset, and, the kind of energy they have for IT and so on, they've also become bit like foreigners in their own country. So for them, discovery of India
Yes.
is very important.
That's very, very true. Very nicely pointed out by you, because I think we all know
That is
till
right.
5 years ago, a typical young couple would only go to Goa. Otherwise, they would go to Thailand or anywhere else.
No, but
I think that has dramatically changed.
No, but Neemrana changed that a lot, So we now people, we are huge in weddings and huge in conferences. So why would anybody from the NCR go to, Singapore, Malaysia? Because people do that privately also. So if they want to just do pure work, they sit in a car and they arrive in 2 hours, and they just get to do a lot of work. So the big chains tell us, you've taken all our conference market, our wedding market, because we are creating a product which is real, which touches India, and you can't shut your eyes and say, I'm home,
So wedding market is really.
So let's say that we are destined to grow as travel and tourism is a major component of the Indian economy's growth, and all signals that we can see point to a kind of a happy future ahead.
But
I would think-
with the rider that Kapil has pointed out, that we can't be complacent about it, it's going to happen. I think we have to work at double the speed now because of some lost time.
That is true of other segments too, equally. It is also true of hospitality. The kind of growth we are talking about, hotels, where is the manpower to service that growth?
Sure.
So these are critical issues.
If you see, Mr.
I
Berry,
think
when you
service
do,
standards,
Yeah.
I'm hearing very often now
Have fallen.
from leading hotels or
Service standards are for.
feedback from leading hotels is that the overall service standard is not as it was 5 years ago. I don't want to name a hotel, but I was at a very leading hotel in Delhi just 5-6 days ago, and I was surprised to see not one person was over 20 years of age in that hotel. Not one staff was over 20, and they looked to me real freshers, and they were wearing full uniforms with their nameplates They were not apprentices.
Yeah, when you ask them
Yeah.
questions, they can't answer them. But
No.
for the last 20 years, I've been working with different governments in Rajasthan to say, let's do a skill development
No, it's not-
institute.
it's
But
not happening.
nobody's
It's not
interested.
happening. It's
When
not
when election comes, people talk about employment. But when election is over, that's the time to do it. So we are ready to do it. But
I
nobody.
can only
So
tell you.
I asked this waiter, I said, do you have a single malt? And his reply to me was, सर हम विस्की बताते हैं आपको कौन सी है, 2 मिनट बताइए रुकिए एनी वेंट अवे ही नेवर केम बैक but these are concerns on the ground. Overall level of expectation is high now because people have also seen some good services, good hospitality, and they don't want a break in that standard.
But can I add something else to it, which is positive, because we should also, people are now saying that when we are traveling in India, which includes foreigners and Indians, that they don't want to go to a hotel in Rajasthan and ask for a croissant. Because they did that in Paris. Why would you get a bad croissant made by some machine which is sold to people?
That's
So we have 1,200 kinds of rotis, somebody pointed out. So if you get a lachedar paratha, like the mille-feuille of Paris, the French like that. They have it just by itself. So we should be...
No, so are the Indians also lapping it
Yes,
up yet or
yes,
no?
they are. Indians
So
now
Indians
come...
are dropping their croissant and their cakes.
That's a stage. You go through it. You order things you don't know how to say it.
I remember Mayawati celebrated her birthday some years back, and there was this huge cake, and
Like that.
now that is aspirational. I
No,
want to tell the
but
world
there's a
I've also
cycle.
arrived. I can cut a cake too, and a cake which is going to serve.
No, but that
1,000
lasts
people around me.
a little while. Then you get to the next
So now
stage.
we're coming back. The circle is coming
No,
back.
when
so
we
thank
were-
you,
yeah.
friends, for being on this episode. Thank you very much for all your inputs.